President, please be seated. The court is now in session. During today's sessions, and as the Chamber has already informed the parties to the proceedings, we did that on the 24th and 25th of January, that the Chamber would be hearing the testimonies of Mr. Al-Rakov. We have been informed appropriately that today we can conduct the proceedings as scheduled. Mr. Saikolwati, you are now instructed to report on the status of the parties to the proceedings. Mr. Saikolwati, Mr. President, all the parties to the proceedings are present, except Mr. Pik Ong, National Co-Lead Lawyer for the civil parties, who is absent due to his personal commitment. Mr. Ieng Sari is present in his holding cells due to his health concerns, and Mr. Nuon Chea is also absent due to his health concerns. He is still admitted to the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital. He has submitted his waiver. He has waived his right to be present during the testimonies of TCW 565. TCW 565 is now available. The witness has already mentioned that the witness has or is not in any relationship with an accused or a civil party admitted before this chamber. The witness will take an oath before the chamber in a moment. Thank you, Mr. President. The President, thank you, Mr. Saikolwati. Before we call the witness, the chamber wishes to rule on the requests by Mr. Nuon Chea submitted to the chamber on the 25th of January 2005. The chamber is seized of this waiver. Mr. Nuon Chea has waived his right to be present in the testimony of this witness, TCW 565. The waiver was submitted in the hospital through his counsel. And according to the medical report, we have learned that Mr. Nuon Chea's health is improving significantly and he could be released or discharged from the hospital shortly. The chamber notes that Mr. Nuon Chea is still being admitted to the hospital. However, he is mentally fit and he has waived his right to be present in the proceedings during the testimonies of TCW 565. The chamber, therefore, now conducts the hearing of the testimonies of TCW 565 without the presence of Mr. Nuon Chea. Court officer is now instructed to bring in the witness. The President, court officer is now instructed to hold on. Counsel Kanawaz, you on your feet, you may now proceed. The President, could you please hold him back there for a while?
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, and good morning to everyone in and around the courtroom. The reason why I'm standing on my feet is in regards to the prosecution request on Friday for additional time. We received an email at approximately 3:06 Friday concerning this particular witness, and in paragraph 3, the prosecution apparently, while preparing for the testimony of Mr. Rokar, suddenly realized that the gentleman may have more information to reveal here in court, and therefore sought additional time. Normally, we don't take a harsh position when additional time is requested. However, I do take this opportunity to point out, one, we received it on Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when it was well known, well in advance, that the gentleman was going to come and give evidence. Two, we heard a presentation from another prosecutor last week which made reference to the gentleman and indicated that he would have testimony to give. So obviously it was well known of who this person is and what he may have to contribute. Three, Mr. Rokoff is rather an institution in Phnom Penh. Everyone more or less knows him. We know him from the movie The Killing Fields, played by John Malkovich. So it seems rather shocking that the prosecution at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday all of a sudden came to this revelation that, gee, Mr. Rokoff may have some additional information, and therefore we may need additional time. As a matter of principle, we think that the trial chamber should stick to its current schedule. In the future, if the prosecution wishes to ask for additional time, they should do so in a timely fashion, not wait until a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock to make such submissions, particularly when this is not a surprise witness, and he is not an inconsequential witness. He is well known. It was well known in advance that he would come and give evidence, and it was well known the topics to which he could contribute for 002/01, or in fact 002 entirely. Thank you.
The President, thank you, Counsel. International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to you and the members of the bench and counsel. I'm rather surprised by this objection. I believe Mr. Carnivus's description of precedent in this court is rather off. It has been frequent, in fact, that people have made requests for more time on the day the witness testifies, depending on how things proceed, and we made an effort to notify the parties ahead of time of this. Furthermore, I would note that it was only at 1 p.m., I believe, Friday afternoon, where the Nunchea team indicated that they were prepared to provide a waiver so that we could go forward with this witness. Indeed, the night before, in the papers that were reported that morning, Mr. Nunchea's international counsel was quoted as saying he would not provide a waiver. So there was a degree of uncertainty last week as to whether or not we would be proceeding with this witness. We have been proceeding diligently with him. We will proceed diligently with our questioning, of course, and may be able to finish within the time. However, I would note another reason for our request is that we find ourselves in the circumstance where court time tomorrow may end up not being used if we finish the witness today. Under these circumstances, it seems to us it is reasonable, if the parties need some additional time with this witness, who we believe can provide detailed testimony about the events leading up to the day of 17 April and the events immediately after that. If the parties require additional time, it seems to us that the court proceedings tomorrow may be available. Now, I'm prepared to proceed to advise the court after the morning session how much additional time we believe based on that, but we did want to notify the court ahead of time of the possibility that we would request some additional time to complete our examination of this witness.
The President. On this particular issue, following hearing the observation by parties, the Chamber will assess this situation as the situation unfolds. Court officer is now instructed to usher in the witness. The President. Good morning, Mr. Witness. What is your name? Can you tell the Chamber your full name?
Yes, my name is Alan Thomas Rockoff.
The President. Thank you, Mr. Rockoff. How old are you now?
64.
Thank you. Where are you currently residing?
I live in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA.
Thank you. What is your occupation?
I'm a photographer.
Thank you. I would like to remind you, Mr. Rockoff, that you pause until you see the red light on your mic before you start, because it is important that your microphone is activated before you speak. Otherwise, your testimony will not get through the sound system and the interpreter would not be able to interpret your testimony. So please be advised accordingly. Can you tell the court the names of your father and mother?
My father's name is Louis Rockoff. My mother's name is Marie Rockoff.
Are you married? If so, what is your wife's name and how many children have you got?
My wife's name is Victoria Bornis, and I have no children.
Thank you. What is your nationality?
American.
Mr. Rockoff, in your capacity as the witness before the trial chamber, the chamber requires you to take an oath in accordance with your belief and religion. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Faiza, please conduct the oath for Mr. Rockoff in accordance with his belief and religion.
Good morning, Mr. Rockoff. Please place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and repeat the following oath after me. I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Rockoff. According to the report by the greffier, to your knowledge, you are not related by blood or by marriage to any civil parties to case 002, and you are not related by blood or by marriage to any of the co-accused, either Mr. Nuon Chia, Khieu Sampon, or Ieng Sari. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. The Chamber wishes to advise you on your rights and obligation. In your capacity as the witness before the trial chamber, you may refuse to respond to any question or any request for your comments which may incriminate yourself. In other words, you may enjoy the right against self-incrimination. So in your capacity as the witness, throughout the proceeding of this testimony, you shall, however, respond to all the questions posed by parties or the chamber. And as a witness, you have to tell the truth, nothing but the truth, based on what you have seen, what you have recollected, or you have experienced yourself through your observation concerning the events that you have come across. And you respond to questions concerning those events posed by parties or judges of the bench. Mr. Rockoff, have you ever provided any interview to the investigators of the OCIJ of the Extraordinary Chambers in the courts of Cambodia before?
As of now, I have not.
Thank you. The Chamber wishes to advise the prosecutor that in conducting the testimony of this particular witness, the Chamber will hand over the floor to the prosecution to put the question to the witness first. And as for the time allocation, the Chamber has already advised the prosecutor and other parties. The prosecutor, you may proceed now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Rockoff. My name is Dale Lysak. I'm one of the international prosecutors at the court, and I will be asking you some questions this morning. Let me remind you, we'll be we will both be speaking in English. There will be translators who will be at the same time translating my questions and your answers. So if you could pause briefly after my questions so that the interpreters can keep up, and if you can wait for the red light before speaking, that will allow the interpreters to accurately interpret today. I wanted to start, you indicated that your occupation was a photographer. Could you give us a brief overview of your career as a photographer, when you began, and the various places you've worked during your career?
I started my photography while I was serving on active duty in the United States Army. I first started while I was stationed in Germany. I was sent to Vietnam. During my service in the Army in Vietnam, I transferred into photography, and I worked that job for half of the time I was in Vietnam. When I was discharged from the military in 1973, February 73, I came back to Indochina, and I lived in Cambodia 73, April 73, until May 75. I worked as a freelance photographer.
Thank you for that overview. Turning now to the period when you arrived in Cambodia and began working as a freelance photographer in April 1973. Can you tell us when you arrived in this country at that time, was the U.S. Air Force bombing missions of Cambodia still ongoing at that time?
Yes, the American bombing campaign did not stop until August 15th, 73.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question, which was when did it end? You've indicated the 15th of August, 1973. How do you recall that date?
Well, I remember that date very well. I was out on Highway 3 most of that morning. I remember right around 12 noon, which was supposed to be the end of the American bombing campaign, there were a few bombing missions in the vicinity, and then it stopped. So I have a very clear recollection of 15 August.
Thank you, Mr. Rockoff. I want now to ask you some questions of areas that you visited during the war in Cambodia from 1973 up to April 1975. Can you, again, why don't we start, if you could give us an overview of where the locations that you visited and covered as a photographer during that time period.
During the time I worked out of Phnom Penh, there were very few places you could go to in Cambodia beyond a 20 or 30 kilometer distance from Phnom Penh. A few provincial capitals you could fly to. The highways were almost always closed. The 2 years I was here, Highway 4 to Kampong Sam was only open 2 times for a few days each. If you wanted to go out to the deep countryside, you would have to hitch a ride with the military or sometimes with their helicopters. So I did go to a few places, but usually it was going out on the roads, such as Highway 4, Highway 5, and Highway 1 were the 3 highways where the most of the battles took place.
Was there a period during this the period of the war between 1973 and 1975 that you were able to go to Udong?
I had been to Udong in 1970 when I was in the U.S. Army and the U.S. incursion into Cambodia for 2 months. The incident at Udong during the 2 years I was here, the B-52 mistaken strike on the town, I did not have a chance to go down there for that.
Do you recall a period where Udong, the town of Udong, had originally been captured by the Khmer Rouge, but was then retaken by the Lon Nol government forces? Do you recall that event?
I recall, I was not there, but I recall the event, and I'm sorry I cannot recollect the approximate date or dates.
After the Lon Nol government forces had recaptured the town of Udong, were you able to make a trip there to see the city or town?
No.
Were you present during a battle that took place later in 1974 near Kampong Chenang?
Kampong Chenang, I was in Kampong Chenang beginning of October 1974. There was a significant battle going on between the Cham Brigade and the Khmer Rouge. I had also gone to Kampong Chenang to help recover the body of an Associated Press photographer, Cambodian photographer named Lim Savat. He had been killed 5 days earlier, and I was with a group of Khmer soldiers that helped recover his body, and it was sent to Phnom Penh for his family to cremate. I stayed up there, and the day after helping to recover Lim Savat's body, I was seriously wounded. I was medevaced out of there, and that pretty much is what happened during my 3 days up in Kampong Chenang.
How were you injured while you were in Kampong Chenang?
Shrapnel from burst in a tree maybe 20 meters from me, maybe a mortar or a recoilless rifle. I'm not certain which. I was wounded very seriously, shrapnel in my wrist, a few other parts of the body, and I had a piece that went through the right atrium of the heart. The Korean photographer, Joseph Lee, who I was with, was wounded also. We were taken back to a field hospital where I had surgery, emergency surgery, maybe 45 minutes to an hour after the initial wounding. I was operated on by a Red Cross surgical team headed by a Dr. Eric Arenander. They stabilized my condition. I had a 2-minute cardiac arrest. About 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I was flown out by a twin-engine aircraft that landed on a highway. I was flown to Saigon, to a military hospital there where they stabilized my condition, and I was flown to the Philippines.
How long did it take you to recuperate from this injury, and how long was it before you were back in Cambodia resuming your activities as a photographer?
It took a couple of months to recuperate, but I was back in country about 5 weeks later.
I want to now ask you a few questions regarding the period, the months leading up to April 1975. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is whether in that time period, the period of February, March, and early April 1975, whether you heard radio broadcasts or statements by the Khmer Rouge that referred to 7 super traders.
I heard of reports on the radio. I'm getting this second or third hand. Some journalists wrote this stuff. 7, I'm not sure of the total number, but the clique of traders, the group that overthrew Sihanouk. The reports coming across then were more than just the group of traders. It also touched on when the war was over, everybody would go back to where they came from before the war. That was a message that was going around. And it was easy for many people to believe that because the majority of the population of Phnom Penh were refugees, more than 2 million.
I'd like to read to you a 26 February 1975 press communique from the FUNK that was issued or signed by Khieu Samphan and broadcast on the Voice of Funk radio. And the document reference is E3/117. That's E3/117. And the reference is at English, page 00166772, French 00281432, Khmer 00242309. And paragraph 1 of this communique contains the following statement, quote, concerning the 7 traders in Phnom Penh, the National Congress has decided as follows. Traders Lon Nol, Sarik Matak, Son Ngoc Tan, Cheng Heng, In Tom, Long Beret, and Satan Fernandez are the chieftains of the traders and ringleaders of the treacherous anti-national coup d'etat. On behalf of the FUNK, GRUNC, and CPN-LAF, the National Congress declares it absolutely necessary to kill these 7 traders. End of quote. My question is, do you recall hearing or reading of this communique from the FUNK that called for the execution of the Lon Nol traders?
I did not read this document or any articles that may have been written about it by journalists, but I did hear about the fact that these people were to be put to death.
Can you tell us, was it widely known that at the time that the Khmer Rouge were calling for the execution of these traders?
I can't say how widely known that was. I'm aware of it through my association as a freelance photographer and reading things that were put out by, say, Associated Press or New York Times.
During the period prior to April 1975, did you yourself ever hear any radio broadcasts by the Khmer Rouge?
No.
I'd like to turn now to the days immediately leading up to the 17th of April, 1975. And can you tell us where you were residing in the immediate period before the 17th of April?
Yes, I had a very inexpensive room in what is now today known as the Hotel Azi on Manivong Boulevard.
And did you spend any time during that period at what was then called the Hotel Phnom, Hotel Le Phnom?
Yes, I would go by there frequently. There were a number of reasons, one being some of the journalists that worked for organizations and could afford to stayed there. They had a swimming pool, a good restaurant. It was 1 block away from where the Ministry of Information would do a daily briefing for the press. And so I tended to go there frequently. I'd come back from the field, maybe the end of the day, or come back to town from being out of town, and I can connect with Associated Press, who had a room, had a bureau there at the hotel. So yes, I would go by there frequently. And on occasion I stayed there. I used to stay in a room that was rented on an annual basis by the Los Angeles Times, and I had a way to pick the lock on the door, and I stayed there, and the desk clerk would let me know if they were coming into town, which was only 2 or 3 times a year.
And can you tell us the location of the Hotel Phnom? Was that the same place at which the Raffles Hotel is now located?
Yes, it is the same hotel.
Do you recall whether there was a period where the Red Cross moved into the Hotel Le Phnom and set up operations there?
Yes, there were some Red Cross personnel that lived at the hotel. There were bungalows out back. Some agencies rented on a regular basis. About a week before the end of the war, about the time of the American evacuation on 12 April, the International Red Cross declared that a safe zone. There was a large banner hung in front of the hotel with a Red Cross. They were admitting people that needed immediate medical attention. There were thousands of people milling around trying to gain access to the hotel. The Red Cross had set up a surgical theater in the back of the hotel. But on 17 April, regardless, they were kicked out of the hotel with everybody else.
Thank you. We'll get to those events later today. I'd like to show you a photograph that is from, not from yourself, but from Roland Navu's book, The Fall of Phnom Penh. Mr. President, this is case file document D313/1.2.11. It's D, to repeat, D313/1.2.11. And the photograph I would like to show the witness appears at page 00432437. And if we may put that on the screen, and if I also may present a copy to the witness.
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now instructed to take the document from the prosecution for the witness.
I'd like you to look at the photograph, Mr. Rokoff, and tell me if you can identify the building that's shown in this photograph.
Yes, that is the Hotel Royale, the building as it looked back then, the banner with the Red Cross. I just find it very strange looking at this photograph and not seeing any people, because I had always seen hundreds and then towards the very end thousands of people milling around. But that is the Royale.
And when you referred to a banner with the Red Cross being hung, is that the banner that's shown in this photograph?
Yes.
I'd like to turn now to the events of 17 April 1975. And can you tell us on that day how and when you first became aware that Khmer Rouge troops had entered the city of Phnom Penh?
The night of the 16th, I was down at the Post Telegraph office along with a few other journalists, to include Sidney Schonberg, New York Times, John Swain. They were still able to get copy out at the very end. The teletype was still working. There was a huge fire on the other side of the Manivong Bridge. The shelling was intense on the Chui Chambar Peninsula. And first indication I had of Khmer Rouge entering the city was around maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, going back towards the Hotel Royale, and the armored personnel carriers that were lined up in front of the Royale for the previous couple of days. A few of them headed north, past the French embassy, and shortly afterwards brought some of the political cadre back and stopped in front of the cathedral, the Catholic cathedral that used to stand off of Manivong near the Royale. Huge crowds of people started gathering. A cadre with a bullhorn was saying, "The war is over, the war is over." Everything was okay at that point. People were not panicking, they were happy. The soldiers, the civilians. About an hour later, the mood changed. But I would say my first indication of the Khmer Rouge coming in, plus truckloads coming from the north by the French embassy, 8 o'clock, around that.
Where and when was it that you yourself first saw any Khmer Rouge soldiers in the city?
Around 8 a.m. by the Hotel Royale, the Khmer Rouge that I had just mentioned coming south from by the French embassy. There were other groups coming from other directions. A group met up with the group that came from by the French embassy. A group from south on Mani Vong they met up. A few of them broke off, went east, I think Street 108 area. There was the former location of the Ministry of Information. A few ran into that to secure that. I spent the next 2 hours, 3 hours going through parts of the city, hitching rides with Khmer Rouge. It was easy to travel around the first hour. I got as far as Independence Monument, then I went back up to the intersection of Mani Vong and Sihanouk Boulevard, where I spent maybe an hour. And I photographed the collection of weapons, disarming of soldiers, a large group of soldiers traveling under guard, being sent towards the Olympic Stadium. I was standing next to Roland Neveu, and one of the cadre came up to him and asked in French, "Where are the Americans?" Roland Neveu said, "They departed." I am very glad he did not ask me because I do not speak French. A few minutes later, some more Khmer Rouge came by, and they saw me walking in the midst of a bunch of government prisoners. And I was just trying to get to the next block, and then a Jeep with some Khmer Rouge. Guy puts his hand up, they stop. I was very concerned, so I went about 20 meters ahead and then I went off to the right, and I hid behind a truck for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then I came out. There was no problem. I just did not want someone talking to me, asking me in French, "Who are you?" I started to head back north on Mani Vong Boulevard, and a white Peugeot driven by a Cambodian in hospital scrubs, the hospital uniform they wear at work, was driving. He stopped the vehicle. I was trying to get a ride. I got in, and he started talking French. And I said, "I do not understand." And he says, where are you from?" I said, "America." And he got very nervous. And then he said, he just came from the Prekhet Milia hospital. And he said people were being put out of the hospital. I was dropped off by the Hotel Royale. Excuse me 1 minute. I walked into the hotel. I saw right off Dith Prawn, Cambodian assistant to Sidney Schonberg. I mentioned where I had just come from. Sidney came up. We went in his vehicle, Sidney's vehicle, down to the Prekhet Milia Hospital.
If I can stop you there, we'll come back to the period that you went to the hospital later. I want to go back now and ask you some more questions about the events that you observed during the morning, that some of which you've referred to just now. You've described to us the areas of the city that you covered during the morning, and I want to ask you now a few questions about your observations of the Khmer Rouge troops who had entered the city. First, what can you recall, or what did you observe in regards to the age of the Khmer Rouge soldiers? Were there many of them who were young or children?
There were quite a few young teenage soldiers. To give an approximate age, I can't say. Maybe 16, give or take a year. And that's also what I would see out in the battlefield after casualties. You would see very young soldiers. Khmer Rouge and Lon Nol soldiers, very young.
I want to show you a photograph that is in the case file now. And, Mr. President, this is document D366/7.1.416. That is D366/7.1.416. If we may show that on the screen and present a copy to the witness.
The President, you may proceed.
If you could look at this photograph, Mr. Rokoff, and my first question is whether you recognize the photograph.
Yes, I recognize it. It is my photograph. I took that on the morning of 17 April.
And are you able to tell us the approximate location where you took this photograph?
The intersection of Manivong and Sihanouk Boulevard.
And who is the person that is shown in this photograph, the person in the very front?
Khmer Rouge.
And do you recall, or are you able to give us an estimate of approximately how old this Khmer Rouge soldier was?
The President, Mr. Witness, could you please hold on? Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honours. I would like to object to this question. I don't think the witness has any expertise in estimating the age of young Khmer soldiers or Khmer soldiers in general.
Mr. President, this is a matter on which people can provide opinions based on their experience in life as to the approximate age of people they observe. We all understand it's an estimate, not a science, but this is a testimony that is certainly permissible.
The President, the objection is not sustained. Mr. Witness, you are now instructed to respond to the question by the co-prosecutor.
The question was, how old do I believe this Khmer Rouge is? I am guessing 16, 17.
And can you describe for us what this soldier was carrying around his waist on what appears to be a belt of some sort?
Yes, he is carrying 2 bayonets, a grenade, and I assume ammunition in some of the pouches. This is same equipment that is also used by the Lon Nol regime, American bayonets and grenades, and M16. It was used by both sides.
And my next question was going to be whether you recognize the gun or weapon that the soldier is holding in his right arm.
Yes, it is an American M16.
And in addition to this soldier, can you tell us what other types of weapons you saw being carried by the Khmer Rouge forces who entered Phnom Penh on the 17th of April?
The majority of the Khmer Rouge had AK-47s, some M16s, but not anywhere near as many as the AKs. Some B-40s, also known as RPGs. And it was mostly light weapons. Any armored personnel carriers that the Khmer Rouge were driving around in, any vehicles, these are what they obtained the morning of the 17th.
I would like to show you now a couple more photographs from Roland Neveu's book, Fall of Phnom Penh. I apologize that I'm going to be showing you some of his photographs. I understand that from the court clerks this morning that your photographs here in town were damaged by some water and that your negatives are back in America. We do have a few photographs that may be yours, but I'll also be showing you today some photographs from Mr. Neveu. But understand that why I'm doing that is because we don't necessarily have all your photographs at this time. And Mr. President, the photograph I would like to present to the witness now is from D313/1.2.11. This is Roland Neveu's book, and the two photographs I'd like to present. The first one is at page 00432444, and the second from page 00432458. If I may present those to the witness, and then we'd like to start with the first one on the screen.
The President, you may proceed.
Mr. Rockoff, I'd like to start with the first of the photographs that was handed to you, and this is the one, if you look at the numbers up in the left-hand corner, it has the number 00432444. And my question for you is whether you are able to identify for us the weapon that is being carried by the individuals in this photo.
Yes, this photograph taken by Roland Neveu is by the intersection of Sihanouk Boulevard, Monivong. The Khmer Rouge in the front is carrying an RPG. The second one in line is carrying an American-made grenade launcher called the M79. It shoots a 40-millimeter grenade, but in addition, that Khmer Rouge has half a dozen regular grenades you throw on his belt. There were many, many RPGs evident that day.
And one question I wanted to ask you, for those of us who are looking at photographs from that day, how are you able to identify Khmer Rouge soldiers and distinguish them from Lon Nol government soldiers? Is there a way, when we look at these photos, for us to make the distinction between the two?
It is not always easy to differentiate based on the uniform. There's such a mix of uniforms. But when the Khmer Rouge entered the city after 8 a.m. on 17 April, the government soldiers were not armed. That's the big difference.
Can I ask you whether there was any difference in the footwear of the Khmer Rouge soldiers and the Lon Nol soldiers?
Many Khmer Rouge had flip-flops. Many did not have shoes. Some had so-called jungle boots manufactured by the Americans. Sometimes they're acquired on the battlefield. Sometimes there are ways of getting boots. I mean, it happens. I know, because I had been wounded one time and my boots were stolen from me.
And in regards to the Lon Nol government soldiers, did any of them walk around barefoot or in sandals?
I have been in the field with the government troops, and even though they are well equipped and have shoes, often they would just wear flip-flops, sandals. I did not see the so-called misnamed sandal made out of tires like you would see in Vietnam a lot, the so-called Ho Chi Minh sandals. There were a few on Khmer Rouge. When after the battle you would find bodies, and you would see sometimes the flip-flops or the Ho Chi Minh sandals. But the government troops had, if you were in a good unit and your colonel took care of you, he would provide you with the boots, the uniforms.
On the 17th of April, did you see any Khmer Rouge soldiers who were communicating by radio?
Yes, there evidently was very good radio network going. Some Khmer Rouge had U.S. military radios called the PRC-25. There was a Chinese radio that looked rather similar to it in size. In those days, you did not have cell phones, of course, or Motorola radios. What you had were rather bulky, and did not see that many radios. But usually with somebody who obviously was in charge, you would have a radio operator close by.
Yeah, I'd like to, while we're on this subject, show you another photograph from Roland Nevu's book. This one, Mr. President, it's the same document, D313/1.2.11. This photograph appears at page 00432453, if I may show it on the screen and present it to the witness.
The President, you may proceed.
In this photograph, Mr. Rokoff, I want to direct your attention to the soldier in the very middle and ask you if you are able to recognize the equipment or device that is being used by the soldier that appears in the middle of this photograph. who appears to be holding something to his head.
It's not a real clear photograph, but I do believe that's the handset for a radio. But I can't say for certain.
Are you able to recognize the location of this photo, or can you tell us whether these are Khmer Rouge forces or soldiers who appear?
The guy in the center that is apparently holding the radio headset to his ear, I can't say about him. The ones to the right on the photo really look like Khmer Krajon. But the guy on the radio, I can't say. Because he still has a weapon on him, I would have to assume he is Khmer Rouge.
Thank you. You mentioned in your description of your journey around the city that day, you made reference to some troops who came from the south, or southern part of the city. During your travels around the city in the morning, were you able to observe any of the Khmer Rouge troops who had come from and were occupying the southern sector of the city?
I saw a good number of Khmer Rouge headed northern direction, coming towards the Independence Monument. These guys look very dirty, tired, not in a good mood, and obviously we're coming into the city from an area where there was a considerable amount of fighting on the other side of the so-called Manivong Bridge. I decided to not go further south. I headed back north from the Independence Monument a little ways and then over to Manivong, then back to the intersection of Sihanouk and Manivong. I stayed there for maybe an hour, and a very, very small pile of weapons in the middle of the intersection then grew to several hundred. There were many Khmer Rouge just hanging around there, not doing anything. There were Khmer Rouge coming by in a truck, giving out sodas, Pepsis, and ice. Everybody was in an okay mood. There was no tenseness, and the civilian population was looking on, but kept back on the sidewalk. The photograph of mine showing the Khmer Rouge soldier in the foreground with the M16, that building in the background used to be a movie theater. Now it's the site of a gas station. But that intersection became the collection point for many, many truckloads of weapons. Young students and some boys, probably too young to be students, were charged with collecting weapons, unloading them from the trucks.
At this time, Mr. President, I'd like to show the witness two more photographs from the same book, and these appear at pages 00432481 and 00432482. If we can show those on the screen, and if I may present copies to the witness with your leave.
The President, you may proceed.
And Mr. Rokoff, if you could look at these two photographs that I've identified and tell me if you recognize what is depicted in these photos.
It looks like a collection point for weapons confiscated from the Lon Nol forces. I believe the photograph on page 92 and 91 in Roland's book were taken, I believe they were taken at the intersection of Monty Vong and Sihanouk.
Thank you. Now, when you saw the troops who were coming from the south, coming north towards Independent Monument, during that time period, did you observe any people at that time who were being taken out of the city by the Khmer Rouge soldiers?
No, I did not see anyone being taken away from the city by the Khmer Rouge. In fact, there was no mass movement out of the city for the first few hours.
I want to read to you a excerpt from John Swain's book, where he makes reference to something that you told him. First, you've referred to John Swain once this morning. Can you tell the court who John Swain was?
A British journalist, writer.
And were you with him at times on the 17th of April and the ensuing days?
Yes, the afternoon of the 17th and also for the next 3 weeks.
During that time period, did you see Mr. Swain keeping a journal or diary?
Yes.
Mr. President, I'd now like to read to the witness an excerpt from John Swain's book, The Fall of Phnom Penh, and the document number is D313/1.2.6. And I correct myself that the name of the book is River of Time. The chapter that I'm reading from is the chapter titled The Fall of Phnom Penh. And again, it's D313/1.2.6. The Khmer reference 00738393 through 738394. English 00431267 through 68, and French 00763811. And in this part of Mr. Swain's book, the following quote appears. Quote, Rokoff, the photographer, came back from the southern sector saying the Khmer Rouge there were grim-faced and seasoned soldiers. Their mud-stained feet and uniforms showed they had not been pussyfooting around. They were disarming government soldiers, stacking all weapons into huge piles, throwing away the boots, and marching the men out of the city to unknown destinations. End of quote. My question is, do you recall at some point telling Mr. Swain that you had seen soldiers marching men out of the city? And if so, can you tell us when it was that you observed that event.
I did not tell John Swain I saw people being led out of the city or soldiers being led out of the city. What he might be referring to is what I reported about soldiers that had been disarmed, hundreds of them, being marched westerly past the intersection I was at Monivong and Sihanouk Boulevard. And I have to assume they were being taken to the Olympic Stadium. A Cambodian said that later on, and that is not the same as taking them out of the city.
So, as you described when you first gave your account of the morning, what you recall seeing were Lon Nol government soldiers being marched westward from the intersection of Monivong and Sihanouk. Is that correct?
Yes, and about 1/3 of them had their hands up, and not many Khmer Rouge traveling with them, because the majority of the Khmer Rouge at that intersection stayed in place.
Do you recall approximately how many Lon Nol government soldiers you witnessed being marched west from that location?
It's not easy to give a good estimate. As I was walking in the midst of them to get a block or two away from that intersection, and as I related earlier in my testimony, I veered off to the right and hid behind a truck for a couple of minutes. And then I really distanced myself from that line of people. I did not want to join them permanently.
Mr. President, I'd like to show the witness now two more photographs from Mr. Navu's book. This is, again, the document is D313/1.2.11, and these photographs appear at 00432469 and 00432470. If we may show them on the screen and present them to the witness, with your leave.
President, you may proceed.
If you could look at these two photos, Mr. Rokoff, and for my first question is whether you recognize the events or location that is shown in these two photographs.
Yes, I'm pretty sure this is the same group of soldiers I commented on earlier. They weren't smiling, at least when I looked at the group and walked with them and then hid. But I'm sure that's that intersection. Yes.
And you indicated that there was a part of the day where you were at the same location as Mr. Navu. Can you clarify for us exactly when it was that you and he were at the same location?
I did not have a watch. I'm bad on approximate times, but it would be late morning of the 17th at the intersection of Monivong and Sihanouk. We were in that location. I was there at least an hour. I don't know where Roland went to later that day, although we did all connect later that evening at the French embassy.
And if you could look at the second photo, and if we could put that on the screen, which is the one on page 80 of the book and the ERN page 00432470. Do you recognize that location?
I am pretty sure that is the intersection of Monivong and Sihanouk.
And to the best of your recollection, is this a accurate depiction of what you observed at that location in terms of Lon Nol government soldiers being marched away by the Khmer Rouge?
This is an accurate portrayal of what I saw that day. It's also in photographs that I took. But yes, Roland has captured that movement of prisoners.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Mr. President, I was about to move to a different topic at this point if you wish to take the morning break.
The President, thank you. It is now appropriate moment for the adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn for 20 minutes. The next session will be resumed by 11 o'clock. Court officer is now instructed to assist Mr. Rockoff during the adjournment and have him return to the courtroom by 11. The court is adjourned.